like to spend the next couple of minutes talking about not so much is the recession over, is it not over. I believe that yeah, as of August 31st this year, the recession is technically over. Will we continue to feel it, the effects of it? Absolutely. I think wouldn't surprise me if unemployment hit 10.2, 10.4%. But you know what's fascinating is if we look back to the recession of the 1980s, 1981 through 82 to be exact, unemployment during that recession was 10.8% at its peak. And as a matter of fact, it peaked about 6 months after the recession was again officially over. So we can expect the same type of behavior in this particular recession. As it winds down now, unemployment is likely to climb well into the spring of 2010. But a more important question to ask, and what we've been hearing from an awful lot of pundits out there, is that the American consumer has fundamentally changed. And as a psychologist, I would like to really, I guess, say to you, not so fast. Once again, if we look at history, and I think history is a really good indicator of what the future is going to be like. If we look back to the past recessions, and people always point to the Great Depression and how that profoundly impacted the American consumer. Well, I got news for you. The Great Depression, yes, felt, you know, a lot of people were impacted by it. 35% unemployment, absolutely for sure. But the reality is that those same consumers, the ones who lived through the Great Depression, also were the ones, excuse me, in the 1950s who went on to spend huge amounts of money during the 50s, 60s, and 70s, really building this economy. If we look at the consumer after the recession of 1973-74, the great oil embargo, where we thought, oh my goodness, the American consumer is going to buy smaller cars and we'll never get caught in this again. Well, surprise, surprise, we didn't buy smaller cars. Again, going back to 81, 82, everybody said, you know, that this is going to radically change the American consumer. Didn't do it. We look at the recession of the early 90s. Again, did not. It was the end of the decade of greed. Well, that decade of greed, the 80s, well, we repeated it in the 90s and well into 2000. So the American consumer, fundamentally, how would I put it? They don't learn. They don't learn. And that's probably a good thing or a good message for most retailers. I predict that this Christmas, and you can pretty much, you know, I'll go on record right here. The NRF is saying we're going to be down 1%. Retail Forward is saying we're going to be up about 1%. I believe we're going to be up over 2%, and maybe even as much as 2.5%. I believe this Christmas is going to be a good Christmas, not a great Christmas, but I think the consumer is going to begin to come back. And the consumer is going to continue to come back through 2010. And by 2011, 2012, this will all be a very bad memory. And our consumer will start to spend again. And once again, fundamental lesson, people have not learned it and are not likely to learn it. In other words, the American consumer will return.